son, you make a run for it and save yourself. Don't worry about us. We're too old to be able to do anything more in these circumstances. So although the boy was very sad to leave his parents behind, he ran away as far as he could to outrun the disease and plague that happened to be in that area. And only many years later did he return again to the place where he had formerly lived. And of course his parents were no longer there anymore. The house was in ruins. But he could see the place where the family treasure had been buried. So it was you, what would you do? Dig it up? Make yourself a wealthy person again? Just like winning the lottery? What do you reckon? In a town where no one knows you anymore, where you're just dressed in rags from having been a refugee for many years, what do you reckon? Dig it up? Remember, the topic is contentment. It's a clue, okay? He reckoned that if he suddenly availed himself of lots of gold and silver and treasure troves of various sorts, dressed as he was, complete unknown in the town, without anyone knowing where he had got the wealth from, he would have nothing to prove that he owned it. It's just his word against anyone else's. So what did he do? He decided to bide his time. And he went and signed up for a job in a local company or a wealthy household. And the job he got was to be a little bit like a security guard. And his job was to basically ring the bell to wake the family up in the morning and to go around during the day announcing the time of day for the people in the general area, so they took their cows out on time and opened their shops on time and this sort of thing. Meanwhile, he kept his treasure buried where it was. It's not the end of the story yet. Anyway, in this town, there was a special king, and the king had a sort of gift. It's like he could recognize other people who had special virtues because he had a lot of virtues himself. It's often the case that if you have certain virtues, you can recognize them in another person. If you don't have such virtues, it's very hard to appreciate the virtues in other people. But one day, as he was walking around his palace, he heard the town crier calling out the times of the day and that sort of thing, and he heard in the voice something that was that caught him by surprise. And he said, "I'm sure this town crier, he's got something much more to him than meets the eye." So he sent out some of his courtiers to try to find out more. So one of the courtiers, a lady, sent out the courtier to try and spy on this guy to find out what it was that the king couldn't manage to place. And she came back and said, "Nope, nothing special there. He's just a security guard working in someone else's house. And nothing special about this guy." And the king said, "No, you haven't got to the bottom of the story here. Go and find out more about his family history." So back went the courtier and started to try to drag out of him his full story. And eventually he admitted that he hadn't always been a town crier or a security guard, but he had been a refugee for many years, but before that he had been in one of the wealthiest families in this city. And actually he had treasure stashed away. He was not going to tell her where it was, of course, but he said he was waiting for the right time to dig it up. And for as long as he wasn't trusted, he wasn't known to all the people in the city, then he wouldn't be able to claim what was rightfully his. And once the king heard the story, then he said, that's what I couldn't place about this guy. He has a voice which is like above his station sort of thing. And he sent the message to the man, now is the time that you should go and dig up your treasure and claim what is rightfully yours. And now with sort of royal sort of backup, he could go back to being the wealthy person that he should have been a long time ago. So with a little bit of support, knowing the right time and what is appropriate for himself, he made the right call on waiting for the time to reclaim what was his when everything was sort of in place in his life. So you can see the value of contentment. Yeah? Probably quite good advice from many lottery winners as well. So let's see what we can do with some advice on developing contentment if you don't already have it. You might think of the sort of people who might need this advice, whether it be people who are just restless by nature, or people who get a shopaholic rush for a short time when they buy something new, have an impulse buy, but then the feeling wears off pretty soon afterwards. So, how can we become more content so that we are able to derive pleasure perhaps from the simple things in life? A meaningful conversation, a cup of coffee, or just a breath of fresh air. So some of the advice is firstly to explore the sort of things in you, for you personally, which trigger off feelings of discontent. So if you're unhappy or depressed, you might start to observe the sort of things that cause those feelings for you, that set off this whole chain reaction which leads you having to find contentment in ways that are not actually good for you. Otherwise you might grasp after things which would lead to frustration otherwise. Second thing is to align your goals and actions with your values. If you don't believe in something bigger than yourself, then it's very hard to have something to reach out towards if you are feeling restless or feeling a sense of despair in life. So you tend to try to solve those problems in unhealthy ways. But if you can sort of double down on the values you have, then that tends to fill a gap which let's say, impulse buying or something like that would otherwise fill in not a very satisfactory way. Third thing is to look for feelings of belonging. It might be your family, or it might be your pride about being part of a like-minded community. If you can connect with those sorts of feelings, often that can solve the problem of you not feeling content with who you are or where you are at in your life. Sometimes you may feel that you are not with the people who are your people, in which case maybe you do need to look for the sort of people who are your people. It might be a community that appreciates your worth fully, or a community that helps you to discover your strengths. But if you feel more productive, then generally the sense of contentment will come more easily to you. So it may be that you're knocking around with the wrong sort of people who are not bringing out that sort of sense of realization or realizing your self-worth. Fourthly, you might need to let go of your past, to have firm foundations that are slightly more authentic, without expectations that are unhealthy for you. And there's another one, we'll talk about it in another talk. Being more grateful can help to mesh with the idea of contentment as well. We tend to lose interest in people or things if we fail to treat them with gratitude. So I'll say only so much. And also we should avoid comparing ourselves with others. So should we compare anything at all? Well, there is one useful thing to compare yourself to, which is compare yourself today with how you were yesterday. And that would be meaningful. If there is a change for the better, then that's something to feel contented about, right? Yeah. But if you compare yourself to other people who have very different backgrounds to yourself, or maybe very different sets of circumstances in their life, then it's really not a meaningful thing to do. Yeah. Some people are particularly find it particularly difficult if they are very involved with their image on social media and trying to live up to whatever everyone else appears to be like on social media. It can be really quite stressful. And lastly, think positive. It sounds a little bit glib, but sometimes bad things in life happen for a reason. But if you can learn the lesson and move on, then that is worthwhile. Think positive, right? And you come out better for the experience, or on a certain level at least. So life is not expected to be a bed of roses, but if we continuously dwell on negative feelings, then we never will achieve peace of mind. There are some particularly Buddhist pieces of advice for reaching contentment as well. So those were just your general self-help blog ones. Did you notice in the chanting just now, the last part of the chanting? Did you have the translation in English? We are of a nature to sicken, we have not gone beyond sickening. We are of a nature to age, we have not gone beyond aging. We are of a nature to die, we have not gone beyond dying. I didn't translate it for you, as there's newfangled chanting books without any translations in. But the reason that that is chanted on a daily basis is that having daily reflections to make us feel the value of what we have is a very good way to awaken ourselves to the fact. Oh, you didn't miss that? You missed a bit? Oh. Didn't have it? Ah, very important part, huh? Yeah, it's in the evening chanting. I missed that. I thought you'd got the whole set, but apparently it was the abbreviated version. Yes, so that is why it's in there, for a reason. So, some people think that thinking about death is depressing, thinking about aging and sickness is depressing, but the idea is not to get morbid about it, but just to give you a little sort of heads up so that you see the value of what you still have, to realize that life is limited and really to make the most of it. Second thing is to learn moderation and protect your health. Learning moderation is not easy, but it's said that if you start with things that are simple to judge or understand, then it will help you with the more complex ones. For example, we need to train ourselves to eat to live rather than to live to eat. Sound about the same, right? Eat in order to live, not live in order to eat. So the food you eat is to sustain yourself. Like I talked about the loathsomeness of food that the monks have to do that little meditation on before they have each meal. Not to get so enamored by the food that it becomes the sort of your sole form of enjoyment, for example. So you become addicted to the food, or you eat more than you meant to, or you think you already had enough to eat. But when you see the dessert, then you realize that you weren't quite full. How can you know when you have had enough to eat? How do you know? They didn't teach you this? You didn't have someone giving you advice as you were tucking into the buffet? So, you know the Mr. Creosote character? Oh, you're too young for that. It's like keep stuffing it in until your body bursts. Is that right? Is that when you know it's enough? Yes? Oh, no. There is some advice, and it's given to monks when they're eating, which is because you sort of shovel in the food, a spoonful at a time. When you feel full, actually there's still 4 more mouthfuls of food still going down your throat, which haven't reached your stomach yet. So if you stop when you already feel full, actually you've got the 4 extra mouthfuls of food on top of that. So it's actually too much. So if you're sensible, if you're eating sort of in a sustained sort of way, then you should stop eating 4 mouthfuls before you feel full, and then have a glass of water. And that will top you up just right. Yeah? That's the theory anyway. And if you can learn it with food, then everything else, which is much more complex, like use of credit cards or any other sort of status symbols which might be sort of dangled in your face, it's much more easy to know where to say enough is enough. Yeah? Third thing is to practice generosity or service to others. Serving others brings to mind the example of parents who take their spoiled children to see orphanages. I don't even have orphanages anymore. Or sort of children in care, let's say, care homes for children. To bring home to their spoiled brats how they are actually very fortunate compared to a lot of other children. So when they complain, they should be thinking about those who are less fortunate than themselves, to bring that home to them. So helping others who are less fortunate, often it brings home to you how fortunate you are. And there's always someone worse off than you, even if you do feel that your life is not treating you very well. Fourth piece of advice, do what you're doing. Keep the 8 precepts. Did you learn a few things? Lack of an evening meal, what did you learn from that? Did you reach your limit? Did you wish it had the extra 4 mouthfuls of food? Or not being able to have a long lie-in on a Sunday morning? Or when you're freezing out there in your tent? You learn moderation in all things, and I can get by with quite a simple life as it happens. 8 precepts makes you stop short and think about, become much more aware of the basics which you use in your life, and also things which may be frivolous as well. But the main thing you learn is, oh, I can be happy even with these simple few things which I have on this weekend, and you realize that how much of the other things which you have in your life actually are not adding to your happiness, but they're just sort of maybe blocking it out in some ways, or obscuring it. And last but not least, meditating every day. Oh, no, last but not least. How does meditation help? Well, it puts you in touch with a sort of contentment that comes from the inside, rather than the contentment which is dependent on the things in the outside world. Once you start to appreciate that there's 2 sorts of happiness, happiness that is involved with things in the outside world, and the happiness that is involved with the things which come from your inner world, and you realize that actually these 2 sorts of happiness are rather different in character, and that the inner happiness is superior. Why should I say that? Well, sometimes grasping after things in the outside world, you're always competing with someone else for it. So if you get it, someone else doesn't get it. So you actually create an enemy by getting something that someone else doesn't have. However, the inner happiness, the more you have it, the more you want to share it. And it doesn't have limits to it either. And it's sometimes described as a sort of happiness that opens you up rather than narrows you down. So a different sort of quality. But meditation helps you to see the difference between that sort of source of happiness and the external sources. And last but not least, monastic training, which in effect is what you're doing. Trying out a simple life, just compare it to what you normally do. Yeah, to see some of the differences. For monks, it's even more sort of simple, because what you actually own is very limited. Everything else is on loan. So 3 robes and a bowl, that's about it. Yeah, but you can get by. Yeah, with just what you're standing up in. So one last story before we have our second meditation, and it is a golden goose story. Mostly you heard about the goose that laid the golden egg. Well, actually they got it wrong. It's the goose that had the golden feathers. Yeah, if you want the original story. Yeah, I think there's a Brothers Grimm tale which is about the goose with the golden egg. But actually they got it from the Jataka stories. And the story actually started out with a nun who was greedy for garlic. Yeah, you wouldn't think you could eat a lot of garlic, but this particular nun, whose name was Tulananda, loved to eat garlic. And one day she was really glad because she met up with a farmer who had a garlic field. And the farmer thought, oh, well, nuns are very self-disciplined and they know moderation and they love a simple life, so there's no risk to me. I say, if you want some garlic, then just help yourself in the field. Just tell the person who looks after the field and you can have as much as you like. Because like, how much garlic can a person eat after all? You know, before they can no longer be acceptable in society. So the nun started out with a little bit of garlic, but as she went along, she sort of couldn't stop. And she picked more and more garlic. Some of it she ate. What she couldn't eat immediately, she carried. And it turned out that about half the field of garlic had been ripped up by this nun. And the farmer came out and He's like, what is this nun doing to my garlic field? And he didn't know what to say. It's like, what can you say when a nun eats half your garlic field? And he didn't say anything very much, but all the neighbors did. And they said, oh, it's a disgrace. How can a nun who's supposed to know all about monastic training behave in such a disgraceful way? And eventually the rumors reached the Buddha. And the Buddha made a very simple rule that from now on, nuns may not have garlic anymore. So, end of story. And it's not the end of the story quite, because he revealed that this particular nun had had a problem with not being able to stop since a previous lifetime. And in the previous lifetime, the nun had been a mother in a family who was married to a husband and had a daughter. And the husband died fairly early in life, and because he didn't understand very much about doing good deeds or any other such things, he was reborn as a goose, but a goose that had special merits. So being born as a goose is generally not very desirable. You know, what sort of good deeds can you do as a goose? Okay. But this, because he was like generally a nice guy, he got to be a goose with golden feathers. So he thought, well, my family will have no one providing for them now that I'm gone. So the goose sort of flew to where the family was and offered itself to the bereaved wife and daughter, saying that if you take my feathers, then it will be enough to support the family now that your husband has passed away. So the Tulananda of the previous lifetime, again, a little bit greedy, she started out by pulling out a feather once in a while in order to support herself and her family, which was going just fine. But then she lost her sense of contentment and moderation, and she plucked the whole goose bare. So it's nothing to do with golden eggs here. It's like, here's the poor goose, like with no feathers left, cannot fly anymore, and she locked it away in an enclosure in the garden. And when eventually the goose started to get new feathers coming through, it no longer had golden feathers anymore. It just had plain white feathers. And when it had enough feathers to fly away, it flew away and left the wife and daughter to their poverty and their lack of contentment. So moderation is generally the word that goes, it is paired off with contentment in the Buddhist context. And the golden goose story here tells us that if you have a good thing in your life, then try to treat it in a sustainable way. Yes, indeed. So, would you like to walk up and down a little bit more? Are you up for a final half an hour of meditation today? So, shall we sit for some meditation? And this time I will lead the loving kindness in the way that we normally do it, which is instead of going from easy people to more difficult ones, we will see if we can spread the loving kindness in a more geographical way. So are you ready? And we'll finish up by about 9 o'clock. If you need to take a little bit of a break, then just do that, and I will lead meditation anyway. Yes. Because we probably still have some people online. So we settle down for a final half an hour of meditation, and we'll have a different style of loving kindness this time round. So settling ourselves down once again in our meditation, especially now that we know the value of a sense of contentment in our lives, both for our personal economics, but also for our spiritual development. Once we've found that contentment with where we are in life will help us to love ourselves on a deeper level. I want to invest the energy in our self-cultivation. We allow our awareness to focus back down to the center of ourselves, making sure that our body and mind are still as relaxed as ever. Engaging with the sense of brightness on the inside. It helps the whole of our body and mind to shine forth with the light of love and peace, beauty, happiness and joy. We engage with that special point at the center of ourselves that emanates a sense of light, feeling of well-being and loving kindness, more and more, brighter and brighter. Spreading out from the center to the front and behind, right and left, above and below. Shining forth, pervading us with a light of love and peace, happiness and joy, pervading our hearts and our minds, throughout our body and outwards across the land, to cover people, buildings, homes and villages, towns and cities, fields and forests, mountains and valleys, lakes, seas and oceans, from horizon to horizon, until it covers the whole of our planet. Extending a loving kindness that extends deep into the ground, allowing the light to pervade deeper and deeper, embracing lives in all the layers of rocks and soil, stones and dust, no matter how insignificant they may seem, with the wish that all living beings may be well and happy, may be free from suffering. We continue to share this light of love and peace, happiness, beauty and joy, deeper into the water of the sea, deeper down to the ocean shores, allowing that light of loving kindness to perfuse the ocean waters, with the wish that all the aquatic beings be well and happy, free from suffering. We share this light of love, peace and joy more and more, allowing the light to expand without limit, embracing all, nurturing all, healing all, forgiving all without end. More and more we allow the inner light to shine forth, extending deeper into the sky, the atmosphere, outwards into the universe, with its stars, planets, suns and moons, expanding expanding outwards into the entire galaxy, the seas of stars, reaching out to the entire universe with the wish that all beings living in this universe be well and happy, be free from suffering. And we extend that light of loving kindness to every living being in the universe, with the wish that there may be peace amongst people, peace amongst nations. May we witness lasting peace, love and care in all hearts and minds, to bring peace to our planet within our own lifetimes. We allow the unbounded light of loving kindness to shine with an all-embracing light, more and more without end, for a few more moments in silence. Spreading our loving kindness, we might cast our mind back to the example in ancient times of an old hermit who used to retire to the seclusion of the forests for meditation, who also had the habit to favor the practice of meditation on loving kindness. And he used to practice loving kindness meditation by day and by night. Whenever his mind was at ease, he would spread loving kindness, facing east with the intention that may all living beings in the direction in front of me, in the eastern quarter, even the smallest creatures, 2-footed, 4-footed, with many legs or no legs at all, be pervaded with my loving kindness. May all living beings enjoy happiness and be free from suffering. The next day he might spread loving kindness in the same way to the western quarter, to the northern quarter, to the southern quarter, upwards or below. And he spread loving kindness in this way in all directions, consistently and regularly, until it became his habit. And the results of his loving kindness practice came back to him in many ways. Whenever he slept in happiness, as if slipping into deep meditation. The loving kindness would bring him joy the whole of the time, and he would have a dreamless sleep. If he ever dreamed, then it would be of auspicious things. And on waking, he would feel refreshed, free of sleepiness. And he always had a very radiant complexion because of his practice. If there was ever any danger in his midst, it would never harm him. And he was loved and respected by people, celestial beings, and forest creatures alike. He was able to enter upon meditation easily and attain the absorptions quickly, his mind coming to a standstill swiftly, because he was able to let go of external events easily. He never bore any anger or grudges towards anyone, and his mind was bright at the center of his body, brighter than the sun at midday. And as a result of his loving kindness, the forest became abundant with fruit. Even animals that were sworn enemies, like deer and tigers, that came into the vicinity of the forest, were able to coexist in harmony, because their minds were pacified by the loving kindness they felt towards one another. So these are some of the fruits of spreading loving kindness, which appear even during the present lifetime. So we take the awareness of the brightness that has arisen in our minds and condensing it back down again to the center of our body, noting the clarity, the feeling of peace and joy at the center of ourselves. In particular, taking note of the feeling of well-being at the center of ourselves, remembering this feeling as well as we can, because this feeling of well-being is very important for us. It represents the state of progress in meditation that we've made up until now. And if we can remember this feeling as well as we can, next time we come to meditate again, we can pick up from where we left off. So for the last few moments of our meditation, we take time to note our state of progress in meditation, remembering the feeling as well as we can for a few more moments in silence. Pi Buddha Palapata Paccekanan Arahantananja Tejena Arakam Bandami Sapaso Sapaputanupavena Sapadhammanupavena Sapasankhanupavena Satha Soti Bhavantu Te. So if you'd like to come to the end of your meditation for this evening, you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel too uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before gradually finishing your practice. So for this evening, that is pretty much all, folks. for both our weekend retreat and also for the DMEU broadcast. May the inspiration coming from contentment in your lives help to lead you to ever greater and more refined states of mind in your meditation now and forevermore.